Hi there folks, I hope you can see me alright. There's an awful lot of light blasting in from this window. So today's recipe is going to be pizza tarts. It's a nice, simple, light, easy to make meal. It's a cheap meal and it's quite a versatile meal. You can put on various different toppings, whatever it is you feel you want to put on it at the time. The one big suggestion is keep the toppings light. Don't go overboard on them. It's a meal that rewards you with fewer toppings rather than piling them on heavily. And that's it. Let's crack on. Let's make some pizza tarts.
So the very first thing we are looking to do is to get our ready rolled puff pastry and remove it from the fridge. Now the reason we're doing this is our puff pastry needs a little bit of time, not much, we're only talking 10 minutes, but it still needs that time to lose the chill and come up towards room temperature. And just in case you've decided to make your own puff pastry rather than buy the ready rolled, you'll be looking to make about 320 grams because that's generally what these sheets come in, is 320 gram sheets. Now as you're seeing me do here, we want to take and we want to press down both the short edges of the pastry, because what we find tends to happen is it wants to roll back on itself just like anything else that's been rolled up in a tubular shape. So take and gently press down. We don't want to completely change the shape of our pastry, we want it flattened, so just flatten it with your palm of your hands. Now what you see me doing here is utterly optional. Eyeballing 6 squares is absolutely fine should that be the way you want to go, but I keep a metal ruler in my kitchen just for this singular dish because I'm a little bit anal retentive and I like accuracy and I like everyone to get equal portions. So if you are going to use the ruler, you're just going to evenly mark it with the ruler before then cutting along. I always tend to do the long sides or cut along the short sides to create 2 long strips before I do the other side, but it's up to you which way you want to go if you're going to do it, but as I say, eyeballing is fine. The very useful thing about the ruler though is it allows you to cut and score a straight line. Make sure when we do come to the cutting through stage, you've got a very sharp knife so that it goes all the way through the pastry and the paper. And if we are using a ruler, it tends to be about 11.75 centimetres, yeah I know that, about 11.57 centimetres along the top for each section. I can't remember what the short section is, but it's easy enough to measure if you're using it. As I say, most people will probably do this by eyeball, but I just like using the ruler for it. Just remember, it's better to put a few marks on the pastry before you make your actual cuts. And as I've said already, the ruler does help you get at least very straight cuts. Even if you're wanting to eyeball the position of where you're cutting, a ruler is still a useful tool for getting the straight edge that you need. As I've said already, sharp knife, make sure you cut all the way through the paper. And if, as here, you've got a lot of excess paper, cut some of it off, leave yourself a little lip for handling, but cut some of the excess off. And with this next stage, I do eyeball it. It's not required to go to the extent of the ruler on this stage. Now, what I prefer to use tool-wise is a very sharp paring knife rather than a large kitchen knife, because for what we're doing, you're going to give a lot more control over the paring knife. We're looking to cut an internal square on each of our puff pastry sheets that we've created, about 1 centimetre recessed from the edge, up to maybe 1.5 centimetres, but in general closer to the centimetre. 2 reasons: it gives us the template where we're going to put our sauce up to and lay our ingredients on top, and it also ensures if we're not going to cross that edge, that bit of puff pastry at the edge is going to have a really tall, lovely rise when we've cooked the actual pizza tarts. And now we're looking to transfer our puff pastry over to a silicone lined baking tray. Grab an edge of the paper rather than the pastry itself and just slide it over onto your baking tray. Just ensure you're leaving enough room for all 6 bits of pastry to fit on the tray, because it's a reasonably tight fit on a large tray. It's not impossible, but it's a reasonably tight fit. So just gently slide them over so we're not crushing or changing the shape of the pastry by trying to lift it by hand itself. And now that our puff pastry has been prepared, we can crack on and start organising the rest of our ingredients. First up is our red onion. If using fresh red onion, we're looking to use half a small red onion, and if we're using frozen, we're looking between 40 to 50 grams of frozen red onion. Now onto our mushroom. If we are using fresh mushroom, we're looking for one large chestnut mushroom. If we're using frozen mushroom, we're looking for 35 to 40 grams of frozen mushroom. Unfortunately here, silly Billy me, thought I had fresh mushroom, I didn't. I then thought I had frozen mushroom in the freezer, and all I had was 20 grams. The little last scrapings that were in the bag was all I had sitting there. But normally 35 to 40 grams of frozen. And for our tomato, we have two options. We can either take one salad tomato and slice it so that we have 6 usable slices, which means we'll be cutting 8 slices basically in total and discarding the very top and discarding the very bottom of the tomato. Or we could use cherry tomatoes, and if that's the case, we'll need 6 cherry tomatoes, each of them quartered. And next up is our olives. We need 12 olives, black or green. Colours are relevant, it doesn't really matter. And what we want to do is we want to finely chop up all of these olives and then set them aside on a plate. And next up is our capers. We're looking for 2 tablespoons of capers, which again we're going to finely chop, and once we've got them sufficiently chopped to where we like them, we're then going to add them to the same plate as our olives. And next up is the turn of our sun-dried tomatoes. Now we're looking for 6 good sized sun-dried tomatoes, as they aren't always the largest in the jar. Most of the time they are of a good size, but occasionally you find small little ones which are almost a shredding of an individual one. So once we do have 6 good tomatoes, we want to take, and again we want to finely chop them, and once they're again a level that we're quite happy with, we're going to add them to the same plate as the olives and the capers. And now grab yourself a fork or a spatula, but I prefer using a fork for this, and mix together your sun-dried tomatoes, your capers and your olives until you've got a nicely mixed together topping. And when it comes to the cheese, I either use a really strong extra mature cheddar or I use mozzarella cheese. You've got an option to use absolutely any cheese that you wish to use, including vegan cheese, but I tend to stick with these two. Reason being, the extra mature cheddar gives a really sharp bite off the pizza tart when you're making it, or if you're looking for something that feels a bit more like a traditional pizza because it's pizza tarts we're making, then the mozzarella is another good option. But both work really well. It's worth experimenting and trying to see which one you like the most. And we now want to take and we want to roughly grate our cheese. So say 75 grams of cheese, roughly grated, equates to roughly 1 cup. So depending on how you prefer measuring, if you don't want to weigh, you're looking at 1 cup of grated cheese. And just like the rest of our ingredients, we're going to be setting it aside until required. I'm particularly lucky with this grater because this handy little tub is part of it and it just attaches to the bottom, and it has a cup measurement on the side too. And now that our toppings are fully prepared, it's time to prepare our sauce. So first up, we're looking for our tomato puree, tomato paste, and we're looking for 3.5 tablespoons. Now, those that are paying close attention to the screen would notice that Daphne on there only added 3 tablespoons, not 3.5. I do realise, but I don't realise just yet. And to the same bowl as our tomato puree, we're going to be adding 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Next up, we're looking at 1 tablespoon of water. Tap water's absolutely fine. The kettle was just at hand with a little bit of water in it, hence why I grabbed that, but tap water's fine. And here's my Homer Simpson moment where I realised I'd only put 3 tablespoons of tomato puree in the bowl, so that's my other half tablespoon of tomato puree going in now. And next up is half a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, and this in particular really adds a kick, really adds a bite to the sauce. And now we're looking at 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. Now you could potentially sprinkle this across the top of the pizza tarts, across the toppings, but I absolutely prefer to mix it into the sauce. And the final ingredients for the sauce, we are adding half a teaspoon of table salt, followed by half a teaspoon of black pepper. And now just grab yourself a spatula and thoroughly mix everything together so we've got all those flavours fully combined, and the sauce will be easy to spread when we get to that stage. And the very final thing we need to prepare is 2 tablespoons of nut milk. Now you can either measure this into a small cup or a ramekin, whatever works best for you. Just something you can store it in until we want to spread it on the edges. Now, if you haven't done so already, make sure your oven is on and preheating now, and it's time to start putting the toppings and the sauce on our pizza tarts. We are looking for exactly 1 tablespoon of sauce per pizza tarts because we've made exactly 6 tablespoons of sauce. So add it directly to the centre of each of the pizza tarts, and then we'll take care of it from there. And with a small spatula, we are now very carefully going to spread the sauce out to the edges of the internal scored squares that we have on each of our pastry bases. Just very gently and with the edge of it, push it out to those scores. Now, just to ensure everything stays in place, I tend to lay down my heaviest ingredients first when it comes to the pizza tarts. So that means invariably we're looking at either the tomato, if it's a salad tomato, or the onion. If we're using cherry tomatoes, it's a 6½ dozen between whether it's going to be the cherry tomatoes or the onion it's heaviest. But with salad tomatoes, they're the things that go down first. And as the tomatoes down, that means next up's the onion. Now with this, it's just a few bits of onion as you see scattered around because this is a very light meal, and if you put too many toppings on, it really overloads it and it loses a lot of what it is. So that's why we're quite specific in how much we're using of each, because it's a few of each ingredient in small quantities really makes this better than overdoing anything. And now it's the turn of our mushroom. Now, as I've explained already, you would normally twice the amount of mushroom that you see going down here, but Silly Billy, as he's mentioned already, thought he had more mushroom than he actually had, hence why you're only seeing about the 20 grams going down, when invariably it should actually be double that. And now it's the turn of our caper, olive and sun-dried tomato mix. Now, I find the best way of going about this is to grab yourself a fork and pile it to the centre of each pizza tart and try to get piles of about the same size. And once we've achieved that, what we're going to do is we're going to take our fork or our spoon, whatever we're using, and we're going to tease it gently out towards the internal edges of the squares that we've set out, and that will give a lovely even spread of the topping across the pizza tarts. And lastly, it's the turn of our cheese. Again, as with the olive mixture, it's much easier to start at the centre of each of the pizza tarts and work out. So make equal sized piles of cheese near the centre, and then when we're finished with piling it, we can then just gently push it out with our fingertips to cover the correct areas. Now, the milk glaze here is a really important step, and it's one that I keep forgetting. Even though I'll have my milk sitting in a cup or sitting in a ramekin, perfectly within sight, the amount of times that I went and then put my pizza tarts in the oven and then went, oh no, and quickly tried to grab it and brush it on. So make sure you've got it and make sure you brush it on. Now, as you see here, you try to be clean, you try to be within the area it's supposed to go down, but you can end up dragging a little bit of sauce as you go. It's not a big worry. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, fantastic. So just be gentle, be careful, try and spread your milk out, but if it catches a little bit of the sauce with your brush, don't panic. And from here, we're going to put them in our oven and we're going to be cooking them for 24 to 25 minutes in a fan oven at 180 degrees Celsius. And there is really no good reason for this clip now other than I like to see them rising in the oven. I don't know about you, but I like seeing puff pastry rise and bubbling away with the sauce in the centre. And when they look ready, round about the 24-25 minutes mark, we're going to remove them from the oven and we're then going to transfer them to our plate. Now the best way to transfer is to transfer the paper and the pizza tarts and then remove the paper once it's on your actual dinner plate. And the way to do that is to either use something like a fish slice or a burger slice and just slide under the paper and transfer it across, and then quickly remove the paper from the underside. And as I've mentioned already, these are a really light meal. They're something that's perfect for a summer's evening when you don't want something that's going to bag you down too heavily, something that's a nice light snack type dinner meal. Now, when it comes to the ingredients, you can put any sort of toppings you want on it, but the biggest thing I need to reiterate is it is better to keep it a minimal amount of ingredients rather than going heavy on these. They're just going to reward you so much better on the palate if there's a few of everything rather than a lot of something.
So there we go, puff pastry pizza tarts. Dead easy, dead simple. My wife used to make these all the time. Obviously you can put your own toppings on it, switch the toppings about, but don't go too heavy on them. It's better with a light amount of toppings on these than a whole load. So let's crack it and have a wee taste. Let's have a wee look first. Look at the puff pastry. Absolutely lovely. You get a real hit from the balsamic tomato base. You get the various vegetables in there, which I didn't get any in that bite, I missed them all. And you get the puff pastry, but it's absolutely lovely. It's a really light meal, and it's dead quick to put together as well. So if you go and make it, let me know, and thanks for watching. And as I've said in other videos, I really do appreciate it because I know there's thousands upon tens of thousands of other people putting out recipe videos.